أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وفوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. لن تنالوا البر حتى تنفقوا مما تحبون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, salamun alaikum jamiyan wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: what do you love most in life? Keep that question in the back of your mind, inshallah. We'll return to it. Not too long ago, many of you will remember, there was the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge. This was a global phenomenon where individuals came forward and dumped ice water over their heads and challenged other people to do it. The goal of this was to actually raise funds. The goal of this was to raise funds for ALS research. In this process, it was a huge success. Over $100 million were raised between the global community. I say this because it's very interesting according to the phenomenon, is very interesting according to researchers. Researchers have looked at this and said it was very successful, especially given the fact that if you look at the statistics, the data tell us that in fact of the American community, the American population, almost 50%, or almost half of the United States population doesn't give anything at all in terms or in the way of charity. They don't give any charitable income at all. And of the people that do, researchers further go on to tell us that 6 out of 7 people, the vast majority of people, and of the people who do give, they give less than 2%. That's how rare it is to actually give. Now, here is the even more stark picture. If you look at the global well-being and giving index, you will actually find the United States at the top of this index, and you will find other countries behind them. For example, the last time I checked, the United Kingdom was 8th on this index, behind the United States and other countries. But the United Kingdom is ahead in Europe. Why do I tell all this data? That this is the global picture that we live in, the world view that we see, that it's no matter what, or despite all of these challenges, we still live in a world that generally, by far and away, is more me-centric, is more individual-centric, rather than a giving society. By the way, there are people who are giving. I am relaying the data to our audience. Why do I say this? We've been building on this concept of philosophy, ethics, and spirituality. And one of the methods by which we get to our goal of spirituality is actually living in this world, but not drowning in this world. What does that mean? It means that I'm like that boat, I'm like that ship that's at sea, and I'm surrounded by, for example, the material world. But if, for example, that material world floods into my ship, I capsize and I can actually flip over. And at that point in time, I get flooded and I drown. This is this analogy of our world. The material world, in many respects, as I've outlined numerous times before, is highly beneficial in many regards. For example, economic prosperity and growth on one side, healthcare and the growth of medical aid, viruses, vaccines for viruses, for example, throughout history, cures for many diseases. We've benefited in a lot of respects. But at the same time, the data has shown that we're not getting happier. In fact, we're getting less happy with this economic growth and this medical growth and all of these things combined. Yesterday, we talked about humility, or the phenomenon of humility. This is a precursor, according to data, and a strong connector to generosity, which we are here to discuss today. The researchers at numerous institutions have looked at this trait of generosity and found it to be a pivotal element of how you and I can be happier in our lives. Yet, so few of us practice and implement this in our lives. Therefore, our conversation today is looking at the concept, the vital concept of generosity in our lives, looking at philanthropy, community service, and our own well being by virtue of that. And I want to look at this in a few different ways. Number one, I want to look at the Islamic motivation, the Quranic motivation, as to why this is so important and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our Lord, has told us with respect to this. I want to then look at the science with respect to what science is saying about generosity and how important it may be in our lives, and it may be the key to us getting happiness, although we may not realize it. And number three, I want to look at the stories of people's lives, people who are not necessarily followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, but of course the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam as well, in terms of how they implemented generosity in their lives and what benefits did those individuals derive from it themselves. This is our schedule for the conversation, inshallah. So number one, what does Islam say with respect to generosity and giving and helping others out? Islam in particular comes forward in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states in the verse that I recited at the beginning, "Lan Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, lan tanalul birra hatta tunfiqu mimma tuhibbun." That is to say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Lan tanalul birra." That lan, this term that is used in the Arabic language in the Quran al-Majid wal Furqan al-Hamid, it's an exclusive term. Whenever lan, it means never. Never is that term that this will never happen. An example of this is Musa alayhi salam on the mount. When he has a conversation, Moses, Kalimullah, the one who has the ability to speak to God, when he has a conversation with God, he says that, "I want to see you." He says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "I want to see you." At that point, Allah responds to Musa and says, "Musa, lan tarani." Musa, you will never see me. The same "you will never" is being used here. Never, in the sense that it's not going to happen. It's an impossibility. Therefore, Allah is laying out a principle here. You will never what? What is the verse telling us? The verse is saying, "Lan tanalul birra hatta tunfiqu mimma tuhibbun." You will never achieve, you will never attain, you will never get righteousness, good, reward in your life until and unless you give away from that which you love. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement in the Quran al-Majid wa Furqan al-Hamid. A very clear and categorical statement that if you want to achieve righteousness, if you want to achieve good, if you want to achieve prosperity in the hereafter, and perhaps even in this world, you need to give away from that which you love. So I return to the question that I asked in the beginning. What is it that you love? What is it that we love? And what is from that thing that we love, whether it's our life, our property, our loved ones, whatever it may be. We may not be asked to, for example, give our lives in this part of the world, for example, or wherever we may be at this point in time. But there may be other things that we can give from. Which of those things, our property, our time, our skills, our network, our efforts, which of these are we using in order to help make the world a better place from the Quranic perspective? This is what is clear. Why is this conversation so important to us as a community, but globally as well? I say this because according to the World Bank, 2.5 billion, with a B, 2.5 billion people on this planet live on $2 or less a day. Less than $2. Imagine, you and I don't even bat an eye on spending that money, for example, on coffee, or half that amount on coffee, for example. By the way, I'm not saying for anyone to stop that. What I'm saying is put things in relative perspective. Number one, 2.5 billion people, less than $2 a day. 780 million, almost 1 billion people on this planet do not have access to clean water. That means that that water that runs from our faucets in the West many times, that runs from our taps, they don't have access to even that type of water. They have to walk for miles at a time, many a times, in order to get drinking water, in order to get water to be able to have their bare necessity to survive in life. Furthermore, millions of children, at least 6 million children every single year die of preventable causes, meaning their death could have been avoided if something happened. If what happened? If only $200 were sourced to those children and they got that, they could have survived. Imagine the value of a human life in our society has gone below $200 for an entire life. Imagine what you and I spend $200 on. This is getting at the motivation of what's going on in our society and what is our responsibility from this dimension. Because we hear, for example, it is attributed to Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam that multiple times this Imam, the grandson of Rasulullah, and other Ahlul Bayt, but let's use this example, multiple times in their life, they gave at least half of their income away in charity, or if not all of their income away. How is that possible? Sayyid Hakim comments on this and he says that, do we have any doubt that, for example, Allah will reward Imam Hassan alayhi salam or the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam for their sacrificing and their giving half of their wealth or more away to people, other people? There's no doubt in our mind, Allah will reward them. But sometimes when we think about this in our own lives, there's a gap. We think that, for example, oh, this is just for the imams, this is just for the infallibles, this is not for us to do. And he says this is one of the impediments that can be there on the way to spirituality in our lives, where it's not that, for example, we control our material possessions, but rather our material possessions begin to control us. How? They do this by us thinking in our minds and our hearts that if we give this away, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that God who provided for us in the first place, who gave us this benefit, this ni'mah, this blessing in the first place, is somehow not going to be able to give it to us in the future. And he cites a beautiful tradition from the Holy Prophet in this space that is attributed to the Holy Prophet, where he says that it's not that austerity, that being humble in your means, it is not that it means that you don't have trust, for example, in yourself, that you look at your hand and you trust what's in your hand. It's not that. It's that you have more trust of what's in your hand. You have more trust in actually the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than what's in your own hand. You have trust in the hand of God, metaphorically speaking. What does that mean? That means that I know that if I have a certain amount of income, I have a certain amount of time, I have a certain amount of money, I have a certain amount of resources, that even though I give away from those resources, I have trust that the one who gave me, who has ultimately all the possessions in his hand, that is Allah. Yadullah fawqa aydihim, his hand above their hand, the hand of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have trust in that hand. That's what true austerity is. And that's really what leads to the line of spirituality. That is what leads us on a straight path towards spirituality. But if we can't overcome that, we get into a very difficult position to try to reach spirituality. Why do I say this? I say this in particular because the research is so clear on how beneficial generosity is for you and I in our lives, yet so few people implement it. Who? How? University of Notre Dame. Notre Dame University, a very renowned, prestigious institution in the United States of America. Researchers at Notre Dame University looked at this paradox, which they call the paradox of generosity. What is that paradox? That paradox is that they've noticed that as an individual, they give more and more and more in their life in terms of their time, in terms of their skills, in terms of their network, in terms of their income. The more they give, the happier they get in their life. Yet the strange aspect, the researchers say, is the more people get in their life, the many times the less they actually give. That how is it possible? There's such a straight path to be able to get to happiness through generosity, yet so few people apply it. I want to point out here as well, we talked about humility yesterday as well. Research study after research study from Notre Dame and other institutions has shown that humility, humbleness in one's being has tremendous benefits in terms of people's relationships, in terms of how they interact with others, in terms of their happiness. But you know what's very interesting here? Humility is actually a precursor. Humility is actually a sort of prerequisite. Humility is actually what comes before generosity. And so if you connect yesterday's discussion about humility and humbleness with today's discussion about generosity, you'll begin to see a roadmap of how you can adopt the ethics in your life and in our lives so that we can have humility, generosity, and ultimately other traits such as gratitude and others that get us to spirituality And by way of spirituality, we'll have peace and tranquility in our lives. The research is categorically clear. The paradox of generosity. The researchers at Notre Dame University, in fact, they wrote an entire book called The Paradox of Generosity, which I recommend you and I read so we understand this concept in our lives and we can implement it. You know, how do we implement spirituality? How do we implement this generosity in our lives? There's many ways to do this. Find what you are passionate about and just adopt a heart of giving and you'll be halfway there. What do I mean? Hatim al-Ta'i. Hatim al-Ta'i was that individual who was the most generous in Arabia, even before Islam, for example. Many people would ask Rasulullah, even after Hatim had passed away, he was renowned for his generosity. People would ask Rasulullah, they would say that, what about Hatim? You know, this discussion about heaven and hell, pluralism, can other faiths go? He asked about that. And at that point in time, Rasulullah said Hatim was a noble person and he will not be punished, for example. Nonetheless, Hatim was that person who they would tell about the generosity of Hatim. That in that moment that he had 40 doors in his palace, they say. And from each door he would give. A person would come to the palace of Hatim al-Ta'i, and when he would come through one door, he would ask for something from Hatim, some generosity from Hatim, some money, some income, some food, something. At that point in time, this person would put their hand out, and when they would put their hand out, Hatim would give them something behind the curtain, for example. And when he would give something, Hatim would whisper, "Go to the next door so I can give you something." So then he would go to the next door, and then Hatim would give him something. And then he would say, "Go to the next door." And then Hatim would give him something. Up until the point that Hatim would say, "Next door, next door, next door," they would go up to 40 doors. And Hatim would give from every single door. This was the generosity of Hatim al-Ta'i. But this generosity did not come from a vacuum. This generosity came from somewhere. It came from the behavioral traits that came from his mother, as we talked about in previous nights. His mother, the mother of Hatim al-Ta'i, was someone who embodied generosity in her life. How? They say there was a moment in time her brothers had given some income or so wealth to Hatim al-Ta'i's mother before the birth of Hatim, or when Hatim was not in the picture. She was someone who's extremely generous. And anytime she would get some income, anytime she would get some money, she would give it away to anyone. Her brothers said that we must teach her a lesson, that she is not going to get any of this income. She's not going to give any of this. We are going to put economic sanctions, as you and I would call it, on their family member, on their sister. They said this, we're going to do this to teach her a lesson so that she doesn't keep giving away everything that she has, so that she actually has responsibility, as they saw it. So after that, for a year, she lived extremely, extremely harsh circumstances, on bare means at all. At that point in time, after this 1 year of difficulty passed, the mother of Hatim al-Ta'i, we're told that after 1 year, her brothers come back and say that, "Have you learned your lesson? We hope you've learned your lesson. You've gone through extreme difficulty. You've gone through starvation. You've survived. But we wanted you to understand that you can't just give away everything you have. I hope you understand that you have to take responsibility now." So they gave her some income, some camels, some things to get by again. As soon as she got that income, she began to give it away again. At that point in time, the brothers were in shock. They said, "You didn't learn your lesson? You didn't learn when we gave you a year of hardship and now you got something and then you're giving it away? We thought you'd learn your lesson." At that point in time, she said, "This 1 year of difficulty has taught me the most invaluable lesson." They said, "What is that?" She said that I realized at this moment how difficult it is to go through a period of starvation and difficulty for 1 year. Therefore, I made the promise to myself that if I get anything in my life, I will never let anyone else face the difficulty that I faced. Look at the difference in the worldview. Look at how the worldview shifts. The brothers are thinking that this lesson will teach her to look after herself. Look at how this 1 year, the perspective of the mother of Hatim al-Ta'i was so different, where she said that, "No, this difficulty that I've gone through, now because of going through this difficulty, I know what it feels like. I won't let anyone else go through this again." It's a completely different paradigm. It's a completely different shift. These traits of humility, of generosity, are part and parcel of Islamic ethics, Islamic philosophy, and Islamic spirituality. But they're not just for Islam, they're for humanity, to serve the world. But this was the generosity of Hatim al-Ta'i. 40 doors, one after the other. He's telling the person, the next person, one after the one after the other, one after the other. Go from this door, go from this door, go to this door, and I will give you at each door. But ask Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. It is said that someone says that at some point in time they asked Ali ibn Abi Talib that who's more generous. They asked the Imam who's more generous, Hatim al-Ta'i or for example Ali ibn Abi Talib, and the response came back. What was the generosity of Hatim? They said the generosity of Hatim is that every time someone would come to one door, they would give, Hatim would give, and he would say, go to the next door, door after door after door, up until the point of 40 doors. They say that this is the generosity of Hatim, but the generosity of Ali ibn Abi Talib is such that he would give so much to that individual at the first door that they would not need to go to any other door. This is the generosity of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the epitome of generosity that you and I are supposed to embody in our lives. There's once a time, we're told in a narration, a man from Banu Umayyah and a man from Banu Hashim, they're having a debate. They're having a challenge, a competition. And what's the competition? The competition is the person from Banu Umayyah comes forward and says, I bet you that my tribe is more generous than your tribe. The man from Banu Hashim says that no doubt, and there is no doubt that Banu Hashim is the most generous of people. There's no way that you would win in this competition of generosity. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in terms of giving, there's two types. One is that you do in privacy and seclusion, but there's another type that where you give if it encourages other people to give as well, a sort of healthy competition, if you will, a healthy benefit of society. What we would call in our modern world in philanthropy, a matching grant, if you will, or something that encourages others to also chip in and chime in. So he's saying the Umayyad and the Hashimite, they're having a debate. At that point in time, they say, very well, I will go to my tribe, you go to your tribe. The person from Banu Umayyah says, I'll go to my tribe. The person from Banu Hashim says, I'll go to my people, and we will ask them and see how much we get. The person from Banu Umayyah, he goes to the first individual. And when he goes to the first individual, he says that I am in a competition. He says that I want to see your generosity. He doesn't tell him about the competition. He says, I want to see your generosity. I'm in need, give me something. So he gives him something. At that point in time, he gives him 10,000 dirhams, 10,000 dinars, if you will. He goes to the next person. He says, I am in need. The person from Banu Umayyah, he gives him 10,000 dirham, 10,000 dinar. One after the other, up to the point that he goes to 10 different people. And when he goes to 10 different people, he gets the different income from these 10 people. 100,000 in total, 10 different people, 10,000 each, 100,000 in total. He comes back very happy, very proud. The person from Banu Hashim, he knows exactly where to go. He goes straight to the door of Hassan ibn Ali. When he goes to the door of Hassan ibn Ali, Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, the one who they say he would dress well. And when asked why he would dress well, he would say, Inna Allah jameel yuhibbu jamal. Allah is beautiful, He loves beauty. But this is the example of Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam, that although he had income, although he had wealth, that wealth did not own him. It did not possess him to the point that if he lost it, he would have any regret. In fact, he gave it away numerous times, as I alluded to earlier. This same Imam Hassan, this man comes to Imam Hassan, whose table was very famous, his feeding the poor was very famous. This man comes to Imam Hassan, he says that I am in need, can you help me? Imam al-Hassan straight away, without even batting an eye, he gives him 100,000 dirhams, 100,000 dinars. At that point in time, this man takes the 100,000. And then he knows exactly where to go from this. He was an intelligent man, a smart man. From Banu Hashim, he went straight to his brother, Huseini ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. When he goes to Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam lays a principle for you and I here. What's the principle? Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam at this point lays a principle that he knows the truth, he's trying to make it clear for us. The man comes to Imam Hussein, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, O grandson of the Prophet, can you help me? I'm in need of some assistance. At that point in time, the Imam alayhi salam, he says one thing before he gives. He says, did you go to someone else before you came to me? He knows, of course, it's the Imam. He says that yes. He said, who? He says, to your brother, Hassan ibn Ali, your elder brother. So the Imam says at that point, then you know that I cannot give you more than he. Out of respect of his elder brother, he does not want to diminish the position of his elder brother, who's also the Imam, of course, who will be the Imam before him and all of this. He doesn't want to diminish his position. So he says, I cannot give you more. So he also gives, Imam Hussein alayhi salam gives 100,000 dirham or dinar, take your pick. When he gets this income, when he gets this money, the man from Banu Hashim, he goes back to meet the Umayyad. The Umayyad comes, the man from Banu Hashim comes. At that point in time, the man from Banu Umayyah feels very proud. He feels like he's done a lot. He's gotten a lot of money. So the man of Banu Hashim asks, how did you do? He says, I did pretty well. The Umayyads were very generous. How generous? He said, I got 100,000 dirhams from 10 different people. 10,000 each. Beat that. How are you going to do with that? The Hashemite, he smiled and he said that I got 200,000 from 2 individuals only. At that point in time, the Umayyad was enraged. When he was enraged, he says, who did you go to? He says, I went to Al-Hasan wal-Husayn. I went to Hasanain, Sayyid al-Shabab Ahl al-Jannah. That at that point in time, when he heard this, that I went to the leaders of the youth of paradise, for example, that Rasulullah said, he says that he became enraged, he became upset, the Umayyad, and he went back to his people and he took the money and he threw back to each individual 10,000 dirham each. And he says that I did not need this money, I was testing your generosity. He says, then they said, what's shortcoming in our generosity? He says, I received 10,000 from each of 10 individuals, that's 100,000 dirhams in total. So they said, it sounds good. What's the problem? He says, I was in competition with the Hashemites. I was in competition with the others. He said, what did they get? What did they collect? They collected 200,000 dirham from only 2 individuals. Who? Al-Hasan wal-Husayn. At that point in time, that man, the Umayyad, began to give all of them their money back and they all took it happily. The Hashemite also went back to Imam Hassan and Imam al-Husayn alayhi salam, who were together at that point in time. And at that point in time, he says, Yabna Rasulullah, I was not in need. I was just in a competition with someone. I was testing your generosity. Here is the 100,000 for Imam al-Hassan. Here is the 100,000 for Imam al-Husayn back. Notice what the Imam did. He said at that point in time, the Imam alayhi salam is attributed to have responded that we, the family of Rasulullah, we Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, we, the household of the Prophet, once we give something away, we don't take it back. Allahu Akbar. The generosity of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. He says, once we give something, we don't take it back. So therefore, if you give this money back to us, we won't accept. And it does not matter to us if you keep the money yourself or you leave it in the streets for the people to pick up themselves. This has no value. This is the principle of wealth and income being present with the Imams, because the Imams were affluent, by the way. But they did not have these material possessions ruling over them. They didn't have control. The property, the wealth, the money didn't control the Imams. The Imams controlled the wealth, the income. I say this because in our communities, in our Muslim community, in our Shia community, in our family, we must encourage philanthropy. We must encourage volunteerism. We must encourage helping communities and helping societies. Why? Because the research shows that before helping anyone else, that volunteering, philanthropy, and helping others will help you first and foremost. It will help you in your tranquility, in your mind and your heart, in your happiness and ease. I cannot tell you how many people, I went out on a journey not too long ago in entrepreneurship, in our communities and other communities. I cannot tell you how many wealthy people I met. Some who, for example, made it a habit to give and they felt tranquility in their lives. But how many others I met who did not have a sense of being, a sense of purpose? The worst thing that one can do in life is achieve success from a material standpoint. That is, get the good education, get the good job, get the good house, get the good property, get all of the material well-being, but at the same time, not have a sense of purpose of why they're doing what they're doing. When you don't have a sense of purpose of why you're doing what you're doing, you feel empty inside. And when you feel empty inside, this is what leads to higher rates of depression, anxiety, loneliness, and isolation. I'm giving the cure to you and I to have not only material possessions, but also have a sense of peace, tranquility in our lives. Research is very clear and categorical on this. Why? Which research? Dr. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize winner in economics, who was at the University of Princeton University, he did a study on, does income have an impact on our happiness? The time-old question about, does money make us happier? I'm giving you the answer to that question right now. And the response came back from the researchers very interesting. That if you tell someone who's homeless, or someone who, and Dan Gilbert, Dr. Dan Gilbert at Harvard highlights the research as well. He says, if you tell someone who's homeless and on the streets that money doesn't buy happiness, they're either going to get very upset at you, or they're going to laugh at you, because they don't have a roof over their head, they don't have something to eat, they don't have their basic necessities of life met. Same analogous to what I mentioned earlier, the 2.5 billion people on this planet who live under $2 a day. But if you say that, what is that point after which you don't get any more happiness? What is that point? You know, there's a concept in economics. It's a very fancy term for a very simple concept. What's that concept? It's the law of diminishing marginal returns, or diminishing marginal utility, which is a very fancy term for a very simple concept. And I'll give the example of burgers or pizzas for those in attendance, especially our youth, for iftar time, inshallah, where it's soon in the UK, and some patience for our brothers in the US and sisters in the US. If I ask someone the first burger or the first slice of pizza after a starving day of fasting, what is that? If you eat that as soon as iftar opens, after your date and water, if you eat that, what will you feel? On a scale of 1 to 10, rank this. Is it a 10, a 9, an 8? If you've been starving and you've been craving a burger all day and you eat that, you will say that's a 10 out of 10. No, that's an 11 out of 10. That's the best burger I've had in my life. Even though it may not be the best, but because you felt that way at that moment and was starving or very hungry, you felt that need to give it a high ranking. Fine, fair enough. Then I give you another burger and you eat it. And then I ask you, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is this? They say, you know, it was good, but it was not like the first one. The first one was amazing. I'll give this an 8. And then you give them another one and you ask them again and they say, good, but not as good as the first one and the second one. So I'll give it a 6, and going down. At some point, somebody will say, I don't want any more burgers. Please leave me alone. Interestingly, researchers find this to be true in so many other domains in life, except, for example, income. Income, the more and more we get, we have an option of doing two things. One, we can accumulate more and more and more, and that's where greed comes in. Because of this concept of greed, which researchers have identified, there are two emotions. Not only researchers, philosophers or people of the markets have known, there's only two emotions with respect to the stock market, and that's fear and greed. That's when people actually act. So beyond a certain point, we don't get tired of money because of what we have is greed. But the researchers highlight that beyond a certain point, we also don't get happier with our income. What's that point? So going back to Dr. Daniel Gilbert and Dr. Daniel Kahneman, Dr. Dan Gilbert and Dr. Daniel Kahneman, if you have nothing, if you don't have a roof over your head, if you don't have the food on the table, you will not be happy, and you will need some income in order to be happy. But the research shows that how much you actually need to be maximum happiness is not as much as you think. So they say you need, for example, maybe some money, maybe $10, $15, $20,000 as a minimum in order for a family or some individuals to have food on the table, to be able to have a roof over your head. You need some bare necessities, some basic things. But once that is met, additional income beyond that does not necessarily help. So what's that magic number that Dr. Daniel Kahneman found in his research? They said the number is somewhere between $50,000 and $75,000 at the upper end, at the most. What they found was beyond $75,000 per year, you cannot add happiness to your life through money, except in one very important way. And what is that? And that comes from the research of Dr. Norton, Michael Norton at Harvard University, where he said that that actually comes from giving and generosity. I had a friend of mine who's in one of my travels, a good friend of mine, who actually was a student of Dr. Michael Norton at Harvard, and had many conversations with him on this topic of how giving can actually make us happier in our lives. Dr. Michael Norton took two groups. One group, he told them to go take this money and spend it on yourself. And the other group, he said, take this money and spend it on someone else. And many of them, he gave them $20 bills, and many of them went to the coffee shop. The people who spent the money on themselves, by far and away, their happiness was flat. But the people who spent the money on others, consistently their happiness rose, and they felt more satisfaction in their lives. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, the research is absolutely clear. The traditions of Ahlul Bayt are absolutely clear. Islam is clear. لَن تَنَالُوا الْبِرَّ حَتَّى تُنْفِقُوا مِمَّا تُحِبُّونَ. You will never achieve righteousness until you give away that which you love. But giving away may actually be the blessing in disguise that actually gives you peace and tranquility by what the research shows us in terms of the science. Therefore, take out time to volunteer in your community. Make some time. Find what you're passionate about. Volunteer in the community. Whatever cause that you're passionate about, Islamic or maybe otherwise, volunteer and try to feed people who are hungry, for example. Help build a house, for example. Whatever you're passionate about, and researchers say, find something you're passionate about. Because when you're passionate about something, you are more likely to dedicate yourself to it and give something. If you have the income, give income, for example. But don't just give that. There's at least 4 ways in which one can give. You can give through your time, through volunteering and other efforts. You can give through your skills, your ability to speak, for example. You can give it through your ability to design, for example, if you're good at that. Whatever your skill is, your skills. Number 3, you can give through your network, the people you know. You can connect people with, for example, if you may not have the time, you may not have the, for example, the skills, maybe you know somebody who has the time or the skills, and you can connect them with certain causes. And finally, through your money, you can help other people. You just need conviction, and this is what will give you satisfaction in life. I want to close with one short story of an individual by the name of Imran Khan, who is the current Prime Minister of Pakistan. I want to talk about his life before politics, actually. And for those who may not be familiar, this is someone who started his career in cricket, and this people in the United Kingdom and Europe are well aware of this. For those in America, this would be, for example, our #1 sport in America is American football, and for example, baseball and other sports. This would be someone who's, for example, maybe a top basketball player in the United States, as an example. This individual achieved success on the cricket field, but I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about the cricket, nor do I want to talk about the politics. I want to talk about what he did between that. His mother died from cancer. Like many of us, we have relatives, we have loved ones that we know. Cancer has harmed so many people. So many of our loved ones have been taken from this. And he says that I saw her suffering, some of the worst suffering in the last days of her life. And it left an imprint on me. It left something on me that really hurt. I say this because he said that he felt this pain, and many of you have felt this pain. Many of you have felt the pain of losing a loved one, maybe not through cancer, but through something else. And there's 2 things that we can do. We can sit and say that, you know what, this happened, I'm going to grieve and take it personally, it's just me. Or I can do something about it. He dedicated himself to building a cancer institution. At that point in time, he invited 20 of the top physicians in the country being Pakistan, and asked them, how feasible is it to do the following? They said, what? He said, I want to build a cancer institution that is on par with the United States and Europe, and I want the treatment to be free. He says that 19 of the 20 physicians said, impossible. 1 of the 20 said, you can do the first condition, you can make it on par with the US and the United Kingdom, but you cannot do the second condition, you cannot give free treatment. But he had a dream and he did not give up. He said, I don't want to see anyone suffer the way my mom suffered. And because I had resources, maybe I could give her some treatment to help her a little bit, but other people, they don't have any means. And so he went to he set up charity galas in the United Kingdom, throughout Europe, throughout Pakistan, throughout the world. And when those funds were exhausted, he put his own funds. And when those were exhausted, he went to celebrities and Bollywood and wherever he went. And then he went to the streets and he went to the people. And he says that he got some of the most income from the people who had bare means, people who just had bread and salt on their table. Fast forward to today, not only was that cancer institution built on par with the US and the United Kingdom, not only that, over 70% of the population gets free treatment. and they're all and let alone they have another concept, they have another campus. I'm saying this because nothing is impossible. Only that thing that we perceive to be possible in our hearts and our minds is impossible. Everything's impossible until it's done. You need to have conviction and belief. Rasulullah could have said that I am not going to give any hope in these people, these pagans, because they are the worst and they're pelting me with stones and riddling me with blood. But he had conviction and he didn't give up. 23 years, it took time, but he did the unprecedented. He shifted the dynamics of the world. So I ask you, what is it that's your passion? What are you going to give? So you can look back at your life and say, I didn't waste my life. You don't feel empty. You feel a sense of purpose. Maybe you've lost a loved one. Maybe you have someone who has, for example, mental illness in their family. Maybe you have someone, for example, who is suffering. Maybe some element of suffering that you've undergone. Maybe make a pledge today and say that I'm not going to let anyone else suffer the way I had to suffer, and I'm going to try to reduce the suffering of the world by establishing a cause, by supporting a cause. And one element, as a final note, don't underestimate social entrepreneurship. You can actually make the world a better place by actually social endeavors that make the world a better place through your work. One example of this is kiva.org, a website that was established in order to facilitate the micro lending from one community to another, where people in industrial economies, developed economies, had excess incomes, and people in developing economies, underdeveloped economies, were in need of micro loans. They created a platform that allows the facilitation of microloans peer-to-peer, from individual to individual. Use the creativity you have, use the skills you have, use the time that you have before you lose it, as the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam have alluded to and said time and time again. What Rasulullah says to Abu Dhar, it is attributed that he says that, "O Abu Dhar, make use of your blessings before you lose them. Make use of your youth before old age. Make use of your health before sickness. Make use of your free time before you are occupied. Make use of your life before your death." And I encourage us all to make use of our life before our death. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.